Hey, I'm Brent Ehrler with Lucky Craft, and I want to talk to you guys about a shad spawn. First off, let's kind of talk about when that happens. A shad spawn is typically after the bass spawn. It's a neat transition where the bass are done spawning. They need to bulk up because they've been spawning, not eating. It's a perfect time with the shad spawn and the bass key on those shad. Really, you have a small window in the morning where these shad spawn. And they spawn in different areas of the lake. And if you can find those areas where they actually spawn, you can capitalize on the fish in that first 2 hours of the morning because they just go nuts chasing these shad. What they like to do is they like hard targets, whether it's riprap, rock, docks, brush, flooded timber. They like hard targets where they get up and they spawn. They start flicking around on that target. You know, bluff walls is another place, you know, kind of rocky shorelines. Some of the most effective tools for catching fish on a shad spawn are a topwater and a crankbait. In front of me, I have a bunch of our topwaters that we have. The newest one is the Sammy 108. Caught a lot of fish in a shad spawn just recently, actually, as well, in flooded timber. The lake was really high and the shad were spawning up on the tops of these trees, 17, 18 feet deep, and the fish were sitting there keying on shad right on the surface. I was able to catch a lot of fish with the Sammy 108. That's going to be kind of the smaller version. We can go up to a 126, which is a little bit bigger. The 126 and the 108 are going to be very similar. They're kind of a single knock to it. They're more of a horizontal bait in the water that you can actually fish slower, meaning that you can cast to a target, you can walk it and let it stop, walk it and let it stop, and fish it a lot slower. As opposed to a normal Sammy. The normal Sammy kind of sits tail down. You have to kind of keep a cadence to keep it going. The 108 and the 126 allow me to fish it a little bit slower. If the shad are smaller, I go with the 108. If they're bigger, I'm going to go with the 126. And if they get even bigger, then I'm going to go up with a 132. Now the difference between the 132 and the 126 and 108 is more of a banana shaped style of this bait. If you look at the 126, it's very flat. You know, just kind of tapers down. This has more of a banana shape to it. What that does when you're working it fast, it tends to hop a little bit more because of that, and it hops and slaps the water more, so it has a different sound in the water. So instead of just being a side to side, it's going to almost jump and hop and create more commotion to it. So every time you go to snap that bait down, when the bait kind of glides up, when it turns and comes back down, it's going to be slapping more. So it creates a different action and commotion and sound on the water. The next bait is a 1.5. 1.5 is a very, very good bait around a shad spawn. A lot of times when they start to taper off and they start to stop, not as aggressive on the Sammy 108 or the 126, then I will immediately go to a 1.5, because usually when they get up and spawn, they get up on the surface. When they're done spawning, they slide out a little bit, get a little bit deeper. The bass don't get up and chase and feed on them actively on the surface as much. So if I can get that bait to go down a little bit deeper, then I can actually key on those fish and catch a few more. Now, one other thing to think about with a Sammy versus a 1.5 is if you start to get the fish to follow Sammy and not actually bite the Sammy, that's when you need to go to something that goes subsurface. If it's down below, they don't have to chase it and travel as far to get to it and realize that it's not the real thing. So if I see those fish following, then I immediately switch up to the 1.5 and I'm able to key on a few more fish. Another great topwater bait for the shad spawn is the Ehrler kick knocker. Has a completely different sound than a lot of other baits. It has the 3 hooks on it. To me, I like the 3 hook baits. It increases your odds of actually hooking and landing those fish. The things I really like to look for, especially with the topwater, are seawalls. That's one of my favorite places to throw a topwater during a shad spawn. The next thing would be docks. I like to throw the Sammy 108 along the sides of docks. I can actually walk this bait right against the side of a dock to where every time it turns, it will actually hit the dock. That's what the shad do when they spawn. They actually get up and they actually flicker right on the surface of the docks. So the Sammy 108 is very good around docks like that. Flooded timber as well, and really you just have to key on where the shad are. Typically when I throw a topwater, it doesn't really matter, you know, to the size. I'm throwing a very light action rod. I'm throwing a medium light Tatula Elite rod. I'm going to throw a one of 2 reels, a Tatula Elite for casting a long ways, or I'm going to throw a Tatula SV SV103. The reason for the SV103 is I'm more accurate with it and I get fewer backlashes. It has an SV spool, which is a shallower spool, and I'm able to target cast a little bit better with it than actually make a long bomb. Typically, in a shad spawn, you are going to be target casting because you're throwing to targets where these shad are actually spawning. It's not an open water, top water where you're casting as far as you possibly can. It's more of a target and precise cast. Now line, what I do is I normally throw Sunline 30-pound braided line to a 20-pound Sunline monofilament leader. The reason why I go with that monofilament leader is with these top waters, when you're walking them back and forth, if I go straight braid with a 108 and other top waters, I turn that bait so far to the side that if my line's here, it'll turn and actually hang itself and foul up. If I have a monofilament leader on there, the monofilament is a little bit stiffer and it doesn't allow it to turn all the way to the side and actually hang up. It also acts as a little bit of a shock absorber for when I catch a fish. When a fish bites this and I pull on it, braid has zero stretch. That monofilament acts as a short little shock absorber to where I don't pull it too hard and actually pull it away from those fish. As far as the 1.5, I throw a cranking rod that I designed for Daiwa. It's a 7.2 medium action. And then I'll throw a 14-pound test on that with Tatchuli Elite Reel. Those baits right there are my lineup for any kind of shad spawn. It's a small window. You have to fish it very first thing in the morning, first light to maybe 2 hours after light. That's your only window. Then after that, you have to find and catch them different ways. You may be able to pick it up again in the evening, but from what I found, it's a first light, first thing in the morning. You have to capitalize on that short little window. But it's amazing how fast you can catch fish, how quickly, how many fish you can catch, and the size of fish as well. It's really a fun way to fish. So if you're in that post spawn and the shad are spawning, think about these baits and you'll be more effective.